When it comes to EVE Online, every player wants to know the most effective tactic available. You want to know the meta. The meta controls everything. It determines what will and will not happen. Knowing the meta will alter your views, make you question your reality. It might even make you laugh. And now, you're part of it. You're watching The Meta Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special Fireside edition of The Meta Show. I am Brisc Rubal. I am joined by Merkelchen and a nominate who are not in their right positions because they switched cameras on me.
We're sneaky like that.
There. Now they're where they go. Merc needs to be a little bit bigger. That makes me happy. We like big Merc on the stream. It's always helpful. There we go. Hi, everybody. Today, December 17th, 2022. This is our final episode of the season, the final episode of the year, because next week is Christmas Eve, and next week after that is New Year's Eve, and we are going to be drinking and not hanging out on streams because that's what we're going to do. That's what we do when it comes to fun, exciting, and festive things like Christmas time. But today, I got Merc and Nam here. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hello.
Hey.
So this is the first time that we have done a Fireside show, I want to say in at least 6 months. Got to be potentially more than that.
It's been a while.
Where the hell have you guys been? What's been going on? Why are you not coming on the show as much anymore? I don't like it. It's not good.
I'm no longer a Goonswarm Federation influencer.
Oh, is that what it is? That's how you've decided that you don't have to come on the show anymore?
It's been a changing of the guard. It was as good a time as any to hang them up.
Yeah, I'm pretty much retired from everything at this point, so it's I'm right with you, Brisc, now. No responsibilities here whatsoever.
Well, you still have a responsibility to me, and that is when I ask you guys to get on this show, you do, and I appreciate that because we're going to have some fun today. And I think as we talk about EVE in 2022, and it's Christmas, and we're trying to be nice to everybody, and we're going to have a good time on the show, but I'll tell you, this year feels like it never would end. This feels like the longest year. I cannot remember a year that has felt longer than this year, at least in terms of EVE, largely because I was struggling when we were originally talking about doing the show today to figure out what the hell are we going to put on a top 10 list, especially after like the year before where it's the war's over and everything's big and it's this huge thing and all kinds of crazy shit happened. And the year before also saw all kinds of crazy shit happen because the war started. And we also had, M2 and them at the very end of the year, although I think that was after we did the year in review. So that's
how all the big wars go. 6 months into it, it's, oh my God, when is this war ever going to end? Then the war finally ends, and 6 months into peace, it's, oh my God, when are we going to get a fucking war?
Right? I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's frustrating to me, and I use the F word, and Mr. Britt's is going to yell at me, trying to come up with like good ideas for the show when I feel like this year was kind of like not a huge war year. You know what I mean? It just wasn't. Mark, what do you think? Well, I mean, think about 2022 as a whole. What's your take on this whole year? Was this a good year or a bad year for EVE?
Sadly, I think most of the big headlines, were we to, look at all 10 of what I am anticipating are our biggest headlines, I would say the vast majority of them is going to be situations where CCP have soiled themselves and then started rubbing it over their faces and the walls and the rest of the game and the nursery and the living room. I hate to say it. Thankfully, it seems like here towards the end of the year, they've started to pivot away from some of their worst impulses and programming development decisions they've made in a really long time. But this will be the year that they completely shit the bed Good news is they've at least started to clean it up, though.
Which is nice. We always appreciate, you know, the fixing and things and getting it done, you know, and granted, I'm a big fan on the show. We say this all the time. We will give you partial credit for fixing things you broke, but we're not going to give you full credit for fixing things you broke because you shouldn't have broke them in the first place.
Right. Considering that the three of us were all sitting in the same room at the same time telling them not to break the glass, and then they did it anyway, it's even harder to take it easy on them, really. But, you know, from a player event perspective, I think it was probably a little more quiet of a year than we were accustomed to in the years before it. Goonswarm Federation obviously went through some pretty crazy stuff that I think is newsworthy or noteworthy, but you know, other than that, this was just sort of a humdrum year. We did have that point where player populations were starting to dip into the 10,000 player range, which I think is where you're getting into like perilous territory. Maybe that's why you're seeing CCP start to pivot a little bit on some of the design decisions that they're making, more focusing on getting people in space as opposed to arguing with the players about whether they're playing the game right or not, which is famously never an argument they're going to win.
Not the arguments you want them to be making, right? You know, let people play the game the way they want to play the game. It is what it is. All right. So let's go. We're going to go through, I put together what I consider to be the top 10 things that happened in EVE this year. And I think it'd be interesting to hear what other folks have to say when we start going through these, because there may be things that we missed. There may be things that I didn't remember. There may be things that it should be on the list that are not, things that are on the list that should be not. I would love to hear what the chat has to think. We're going to have a very free-flowing show today because this is the Fireside edition. We have no show notes. There's no news. We are just here to chat with you people. So we're going to go to the top story of the day, the 2022 year in review. All right. Our top 10 biggest moments of the year. Now, when I did this, I'll be honest, we were on Rampage, and I guess it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I threw out into the chat, what do you guys think were the biggest moments of 2022? And I got a whole bunch of answers. And then, of course, I ran the list by Merk and Nam, and they gave me some other things. And then I ran the list by Mrs. Brisc, and she reminded me some other stuff. So this has been a crowdsourced list of things. Now, there's 10, obviously the top 10, but we have 2 honorable mentions. The honorable mentions are kind of tongue-in-cheeky kind of things because I wanted to just highlight these. I don't think they were a big enough deal to make it to the top 10 list, but they were things that happened that I feel like we at least should acknowledge. So our first honorable mention, Test next themselves. After the war, we said Test is next. And they proceeded to run as far as possible away from us, from Delve and Quirius and all of their old home spots in Esoteria and the rest to Outer Passage. But Outer Passage was too far and they got bored. And then all of a sudden they ended up moving and now they are a Caldari State militia in faction warfare. You can see the slope. You can see the slope there. That is not fake. That is the actual slope. They started the year with almost 13,500 members and will end the year with fewer than 5,000. Corporations, they had a bunch drop, and they do not own SOV anywhere in EVE Online anymore. We didn't even have to do anything, right?
That whole thing was great, watching them shit posting on Reddit, aha, goons, when are you going to come kill us? While we're just sitting here watching them kill themselves.
Of interest is that they've got less than 70 players active on Zkillboard right now. And just by comparison, you know, that is a medium-sized corp at best, maybe even on the smaller side. So they're a husk.
Yeah, that 5,000 members, they have not done an inactivity purge, you can tell.
Seriously, I mean, the 70 active PvPers from Zkill, I mean, that's a wormhole corp now, right? That's a good-sized wormhole corp. that is not a Nullsec alliance, or at least not a big Nullsec alliance. So anyway, I have to say, watching test next themselves throughout the year was kind of the little bit of shot of Freude that I think we all really needed. That being said, I'm kind of sad because Villy has left. He's in Horde now. ProGod is a goon. I can't believe I'm still saying that. The rest of their folks are pretty much gone. All the other big FCs have gone to other groups, and they're doing their thing in faction warfare. They were the first of the big groups to go to faction warfare. Red Alliance has followed them. So it's kind of interesting just to see how, you know, you can start 2022 in a pretty good position, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're gone. And that's it. All right, next up, this is the second honorable mention, and this is another one, and I have to point this out because I got to thank Seema for the subtitle on this one. Horde overtakes Goons as the #1 largest alliance in EVE Online. Seema said that Goblins up all the players. Legit. That is legit. So right now, Horde has almost 2,000 members more, 2,000 characters more than Goonswarm has. This is the first time that that's happened in a while. It's been a while. I know that in the past it has bounced back and forth, but for the longest time, Goons were at the top of that list. Even at the height of the war, they were #1. But now, Horde has taken over. Mark, what do you think Gobbins thinks about that?
He's probably not a huge fan of us running that messaging constantly, if I had to guess, but I do not know that for sure. As a matter of fact, I was just talking to him this morning, but we did not talk about that.
Nam, what's your take on them becoming #1?
No, I think it was kind of inevitable. During the war, it was the Imperium versus rest of EVE. And one of the trends we have been seeing continually over the last decade has been, as CCP makes Nullsec life more difficult, the smaller organizations have to merge into the larger ones. And rest of EVE has always been a larger group than the Imperium. And so as they merge into Pandemic Horde, which we're just seeing that the continuing progression of smaller groups being forced to merge into larger ones.
There you go.
And,
all right, so we're done with the honorable mentions. No more honorable mentions. We are on to the top 10 list proper now. So number 10, and I thought this was very interesting. CCP hires some famous names. The EVE streaming community got decimated this year, not because of anything that we did or because people got bored with the game, although that probably is true to a certain extent, but because all the top streamers got bought out by CCP. So Bjorn B, Sutonia, Ithaca Hawk, and General Stargazer. Bjorn B and Sutonia had their own streams, big time streamers. They still stream every once in a while. And then Ithaca and General Stargazer were two of the mainstays of the Alliance tournament, the EVE-NT team, doing all of the calling of events. So Bjorn B became CCPB. Sutonia has become CCP Kestrel. Ithaca has become CCP Overload. And General Stargazer has become CCP Zealous. So there you go. I have to say, part of me is happy. We're always happy when they hire folks from the community that are well-known. Like, we have Elise Randolph as CCP Swift now. We had CCP Aurora when she was in Brave. We always like it when they hire community folks that people know. But man, they really went and grabbed a lot of them this year. And a lot of these guys are some of like the biggest names out there. What's your take on this, Mert?
The silence of our inbox is deafening. They must have lost that request for us to get involved in the mail somewhere.
Yeah, where's our job applications? Where are our job offers coming in?
We might be in the wrong group. I think it's great. I think somebody like Sutonia knows EVE Online better than almost any person in the building in Reykjavik. The day he walks in there, he's probably your second most knowledgeable employee related to EVE nuts and bolts, which is a good thing. Somebody like Bjorn, I think is such a powerful brand ambassador that I sort of will miss having him out there, because he's a very atheistic streamer. People just like the guy and he's friends with everybody. He's not going to stream as much. I'm not putting words in his mouth, but you know how it is. The moment you get involved in the sausage making, you stop having a taste for sausage. So I would hope that we still continue to see him on the stream as much as before, but I would hazard to guess that such will probably not be the case. So I'll miss him in that regard, but same thing as with Sutonia. He's a person who understands the game. He understands the ecosystems. He's going to be a good voice to have in the room. So best of luck.
And I think we've had most of these guys have been on the, I mean, Tony's been on the show before. Ithaca was a co-host a couple months ago. I don't think we've ever had B on. I'm not sure we've ever had Bjorn B on. I don't think we've ever had General Stargazer on, but folks know them from their event stuff, and Bjorn obviously from his stream. I know these guys are some of them are, it's funny because normally you think the streamers would end up just on the community team, but Sutonia is Q&A, and I'm pretty sure that's what Ithaca is doing as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing these guys as they go on and start working on other stuff in the community as well as on the game itself, because we know if they play it, they hang out, they understand the meta, they get it. You know, they're able to have a good time and play and be part of this community, but also be knowledgeable enough that they can go behind the scenes and tell the folks and the powers that be what exactly is going on and what they need to know. So that's the kind of thing I'd like to see. I would rather see them hire someone like Sutonia than go and hire somebody that's got, you know, multiple other like someone from the gaming industry. I'd rather them hire someone from the EVE community. I feel like whatever they would get from somebody from the gaming industry, new ideas, may or may not work very well for EVE, but these guys get it, and I'm happy that they're over there. Now,
most of the biggest train wrecks I can think of were people that they hired off the street that worked on another game and insisted they could just do that with EVE Online. I mean, coming to think of almost every employee that is a total fucking disaster, not that it's like it's 100% of them or anything, but they do share that commonality, not an EVE player. I mean, go figure. It's easier to develop a game that you play and understand, you know, but I think a lot of people would probably be surprised at how common it is for developers to fulfill that, to just be a person who doesn't play the game at all. They're just telling you how to play it.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of like bias and stuff, yeah, I mean, don't worry about that. Don't worry about bias. You know, the claims that, you know, these guys don't like this group or they don't like that group, they're going to go to CCP and cause problems. We have not seen that. At least I haven't seen that behind the
Don't
scenes.
say that in front of a nominate. I can see that he's about to burst through the fucking wall right now.
I don't think any of these guys are a problem. Nom, if you want to yell at
maybe
me,
not those guys.
No,
that's
yeah, no, I think as far as CCP bias against goons in the Imperium, I think that these four are probably going to help that, not make it worse.
Very good.
Like Sutonia in particular, like he has been in Karma Fleet, out of Karma Fleet. We've shot him, he's shot us, we've flown with him. You know, he's not the kind of person who really holds like grudges or has serious enemies.
Yep. I mean, he's one of these guys I think everybody likes. If you don't like Sutonia, there's probably something wrong with you, because there's nobody else, in my opinion, in the game, either working on it or who plays it, that knows more about the game than he does. He is a walking encyclopedia, to the point, like, I would love to sit in CSM meetings with him and we would be there doing balance stuff, and somebody would say something and we'd look to Sutonia to see if it was right, and he'd be like, yeah or no. And it was funny. It was very useful. All right. Number 9, Nullsec Wars. And I have wars in quotation marks for a reason. Okay. And the image there is of the fight we just had recently in HTAC PA. Fraternity was fighting the Greater Trash Coalition and Brave up in the north for a while. There's been continuous Imperium versus Pappy back and forth type stuff. Usually it's proxy war stuff, not anything direct. And then, of course, there was the fire deployment that Init did for a while. Goons came on at the very end for, and the back and forth in that regard. But I put the quotation marks around wars because this was not like 2021 or 2020. Like it wasn't even like 2019, because I felt like in each of those situations, 2019, you had the really big test versus fraternity war that raged for most of that year. That was a big war. That was legit. It was Sov. It was back and forth. Everybody was going crazy. The big war, the Great War, the Vietnam, World War B2, whatever you want to call it, that lasted from July of 2020 to August of 2021. That was the war to end all wars as far as I'm concerned. Now, of course, if you remember the etymology of the phrase, the war to end all wars, that was about World War I. And 20 years later, we were in a bigger one. So we say that now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's, at least as far as I can tell, the war to end all wars was the last war. And these were just kind of things to do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
They were not existential in nature. This was two bums fighting over a fucking sirloin that was sitting on the ground, behind the dumpster. There was nothing in play that mattered.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think if you ask fraternity, they didn't put their full effort into going after Brave and GTC, because if they had, they're the third largest alliance in the game. They control the most Sov of any other group in the game. They got runners, they got money, they got all kind of stuff. You would have thought that they could have steamrollered, especially because they're off time zone. They could have steamrollered their way through that territory if they were willing to put the work in, but they never did. And Brave and GTC have held them off. So the Volta guys, the Blob guys, Banderlogs, Boss, all those guys up north have held these guys off for a while. And now, even now, it's kind of in a stalemate. Just kind of sits around, On the fire deployment in the beginning of the year was another one of these things where it started looking like it could be something big, but after like one or two fights, Constantine and the crew, they just kind of rolled over and ran back to Declan, ran back to Deterid and the other areas. I don't know if they were in Declan, but I know they were in Deterid. Some of the other areas that were like their home bases, and just let us steamroller all the way through, waited for us to leave, and then went back and took all the Sov again, which is it's a pretty standard move for folks in the South. That's a standard South play. You let the big guys come in, they glass everything, they go home, they declare victory, then you slowly go back and take it all because they don't want to get into a prolonged fight. And that's what that was. But in the end, fire is probably
wants to live there.
Yeah, no one wants to live there. Who wants to live in Faith Habilis, right? I mean, who wants to live in Owasso? Or I should say Owasso, Omist. Who wants to live in these little backwater areas in the middle of nowhere? It's like, who wants to live there? But this was the bulk of conflict in Eve for 2022. And I think that kind of sucks, but we at least have to acknowledge it, right? So, all right, number 8. Mr. Smasher Elias becomes leader of Goons. This happened in July, right in the middle of the year. And he started it off with a bang. He came out and gave a very rousing speech that got everybody all excited. And he's been trying to keep that momentum going for the rest of the year. This was kind of a big deal because Asher was the first new leader of Goons in probably 10 years, right? I mean, what was the last, but when Mitani took over the second time, that probably would have been like 2006 or 7, right? It was a while ago. So
no, it was 2012, maybe.
Oh, that was the second time. Okay.
Yeah, I think the first time was 2007.
Okay. So that's very interesting. Where is Asher? Is he in the chat? I hope he's here. He's number 8. He made it. He was number 10. I think he got an honorable mention for being in that video last year, but he made it to number 8 now. So here we go. The leader before Mittens was Cartoon, right?
It was Darius Johnson, actually.
Okay.
Before him was Cartoon.
That was Cartoon, then DJ, and then
Cartoon went AFK, and the alliance got disbanded because bills did not get paid. People were mad at him. He decided to, instead of apologizing or trying to fix it, he raged out, stole everything he could, and disbanded the alliance we had then, and basically took
The old
over the
Goon fleet.
corporation. And then it was Darius who had he still had Goonwaff, and so he reformed the alliance under Goonwaff. Did that for a few months with not much success before handing it over to Mitani, and that's when we moved into Declan and started to rebuild.
And the rest is history. Asher took over, and I'm looking forward to what we do next year, because I get the feeling that everybody's kind of been in a rebuilding mode, and it's going to be time for some big fights, and I'm interested to see what Asher does. All right, number 7. This was a kick in the balls. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Dunk Dinkel wins Eve. The man, the myth, the legend, the guy who is in charge of creating the Dunk salvage drones, asked for T2 salvage drones, made it happen. The alliance leader of Brave, our dear friend, Merc has an awesome selfie of him passed out on the couch next to him at a Vegas. It's glorious.
That was in Reykjavik, actually.
Was that Reykjavik? Oh, okay. All right. So that was CSM 14 then. That's good. I don't know what to say. Like, I miss Dunk. I don't like that he's not an Eve anymore. It upsets me. He is just, was one of the best players for a while. And I think a lot of us, got to know Eve and got to know him and got to know a lot about what it means to be a good alliance leader by watching his videos and stuff. Even when he wasn't an alliance leader, he still had outsized influence over Brave Collective. And Merc, you're an old Brave guy. You probably know Dunk better than anybody here.
Yeah, he's one of a kind, certainly. He's just a real measured dude, doesn't get very excited. I know he sort of got railroaded into taking over Brave. That's not probably something he would have ideally wanted to do. He's more of a logistics type person, but he did it because they needed him to do it, which I think inevitably put them in a really, really good position. I don't know who's in charge anymore, but they've been holding their own for the past year, and that's probably in no small part to the fact that he is a great unifier, and it's sad because Dunk leaving sort of speaks to a greater trend. I think the Eve community is wonderful and very unique and super awesome, and it's also lost more irreplaceable people in the last several years than probably in the decade before it. It's just really, really sad. We lost a lot of huge names, and now he's among them. I would rather Dunk be playing Eve for sure, but you got to respect it when somebody hangs him up.
And I have to say, I appreciate the fact that he had an exit plan. He turned things over to Jinx. He didn't just walk away. He didn't go AFK. He wasn't one of these guys who couldn't let go. That's a pretty big deal. And that's not something that you find often, not only in Eve, but just in general. The list of people who stick around way after they should have left is very, very high, especially in my business. So I think knowing when you're ready, knowing when it's time, knowing when you need to take a break and step back and win the game for a while or forever, who knows? That was pretty brave of him. Unintended. And I want to make sure we mention
that's a huge problem in any leadership role in Eve. It's once somebody has been doing it for long enough and it sort of becomes part of who they are, even when they're done with it, even when they've basically quit the game, they're not doing their job anymore, but they still see that as who they are. It's really tough for them to either step down or for somebody to force them to step down.
Yep. All right. So moving on to something that's less sad. Number 6. This might be less sad. I mean, it was kind of sad when we did it, but the Doctor Who crossover event. And I have this on here, and people might give me shit for this, but I'll be bluntly honest. This was the first thing that happened in January. It was hugely controversial in the game. Everybody was freaking out about it. And then amazingly enough, when it got in the game, it was one of the best live events that we have done and seen in even a long time. and it got a ton of new eyes on the game. I don't think a lot of folks stuck around for it to keep playing afterwards, but I'll tell you, I had a good time with it. I thought it was interesting, and it was not something that we've seen before. So I think it warranted being at least in the bottom half of the list. But it was a pretty big deal. And I thought, maybe this all the claims and complaints that I thought people were going to keep making kind of died after the event started and folks liked it. And all of the fears that, oh, what's next? They're going to do a Hello Kitty one. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. We haven't seen any more of these crossovers since January. Not saying that they're not going to happen, but we haven't seen any of the worries that folks had about it happening. And there were no NFTs involved in it either, which was another thing that everybody was freaking out about.
Oh, a Hello Kitty one would be fun. You know it. I think,
hey, I'm still pushing the cat ears because people want them. So
I think the biggest opportunity they missed with this was somehow adding drone skins so we could make our drones into Daleks.
Yeah, it was
visually
stunning. It was different. It wasn't too hard. It was worth doing. Some of the scenes that they set up for it were some of the best ones I've ever seen, like comparable to what the Triglavian sites look like. They're just breathtaking. It's a damn shame because player sentiment at the time was really, really poor. So you didn't really get a fair shake from the community for doing it because sentiment was so decidedly negative at the time that people would have been pissed no matter what it was. Right. I just don't think there was no winning. The content itself was perfectly fine. It was cool. It was well done. We did it on stream, for a couple weeks just as something to do. The skins are really, really awesome, especially some of those Titan ones. They're really, really cool looking. I would encourage them to do things like that. I think the risk that they run is players immediately assume that they're robbing Peter to pay Paul with development bandwidth. So they're like, well, how the fuck can you focus on Doctor Who when the game is dying right now? Eve is dying, air quotes, blah, 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 blah. But it is, if you know the way the company works and the way development works, those resources are probably not completely shared. So you're really probably not giving up a lot by doing something like that. And we like new stuff, so I was glad to see it. Even as mad as I was at CCP over a litany of other things, I was fine with Doctor Who. I thought it was decent.
Yeah, and I think that the community sentiment at the beginning of the year was pretty bad, and that was right at the height of we started getting hit with the Wait to Fanfest thing, and we'll get to that. But I think at the end of the day, this was a good event. It started the year off. It was a lot of fun. And to reiterate what Mark said, the visuals were great, and the skins, the warp convergence skins, are some of the best skins in the game. They show off all that Eve can do, the colors, the little particles coming off the sides, all that kind of stuff. That was, I think, peak Eve skin game for the devs, and I'm hoping that we'll see more of that kind of thing in the future rather than less. But because I think this was pretty successful, maybe they'll keep that kind of thing in mind for the future. We'll see. Number 5. 5 is alive. Dynamic bounty system fixes. And I have Merc and Nam here because these two were some of the biggest Cassandras in the game saying the dynamic bounty system was going to suck and penalizing people for ratting was not a good idea, and trying to get groups to move around by making their territory suck if they overfarm it was not going to work. Nobody listened. They put the DBS in. Numbers start tanking across the game for a long time in Nullsec, and eventually they finally listened and did what myself and Merc and Nam have been telling them for a while, and they fixed it. So we give them partial credit, because you don't get full credit for fixing something that you broke. The dynamic bounty system was arguably a good idea on paper. I don't think it has ever worked the way it was supposed to. The only goal that it did achieve that CCP had for it was it did reduce the amount of money coming into the game through nullsec ratting. Whether or not that was the right thing to do, I don't know. I mean, people will argue that it was because there was too much money going into the economy. That being said, I think the three of us are of the big on the end of, if everybody's got too much money, give them something to buy rather than take away the money that they've got.
Well,
and I think this change was pretty big.
this is a mistake that CCP makes on the regular. They want to nerf something or they want to force people to do something that they're not doing. And so they nerf whatever people are doing. They add a small buff to whatever they want people to do instead. But what they always forget is that no matter what the options in the game are, players always have another option, which is to go play something else.
Bingo.
And you can never nerf someone's play style to the point where it's just not worth playing. That's just telling them, we would prefer you go play another game.
Merc, you were one of the biggest, loudest screamers about this, and I hope that there's a Merc rant in here somewhere, because I feel like this would be one of the places where we could get one.
Yeah. This one was really tough. I mean, because when I think about the DBS, I sort of tie the banks into it and the keys and the key sites. I sort of lump that all together as the most god-awful, fucked up thing they've done in a really long time to terrorize their player base. And it's all sort of part and parcel to each other in how abysmally bad it is. You can't, I mean, just the notion, when they first started pitching it, the first thing you try to do is get the scissors away from the toddler. But if you can't do that, you try to teach them good behaviors, like holding them away from themselves when they're running, or maybe don't run at all, things like that. We were just immediately like, you know what? What if instead of doing dynamic bounty system, you made a bonus system? Let's make some systems better than others, but let's not vary from the baseline we have that exists right now. Because anytime you penalize people, I mean, are we going to just pretend for a minute here that fucking wastage was not an idea that rolled out of the Reykjavik Brain Trust? Wastage? Like, that's going to go over really well with your fucking wastage dynamic bounty system bullshit shitty key sites that only 5 fucking bots in the game actually do. You're telling me these weren't going to go over well? How could we have ever fucking known they weren't going to go over well unless maybe 3 guys that are sitting here right fucking now already told them they were the stupidest fucking ideas those morons had rolled out of Reykjavik in years? And that's saying a lot. Has anybody watched the progression of this game for the past half a fucking decade? To top that all with the dynamic bounty system, with the fucking reserve banks, this bullshit that just completely kills off the plankton of the ecosystem of EVE Online. You morons, you want thanks for that? Give me a fucking break. Play your game or listen to your players. Stop fucking around. The people that are logged in right now, you've got 25,000 people on a mission of mercy to try to help you not kill your game. Start getting it right. Quit fucking around. I'm so sick of having this conversation. I don't think I can take it anymore. It's just humorous. It's like Groundhog Day working with these people. One time after the next. If you touch the stove, you will get burnt. We touched the stove. We're on fire now. What should we do? Well, number 1, you shouldn't have touched it. Number 2, maybe you should stop touching it. That's what I think about the fucking dynamic bounty system.
This has been a consistent thing over over the entire history of EVE, as developers cycle in and out. And the game, once upon a time, the game had a problem, and CCP makes a change to try and fix it. And that change doesn't work. We better undo that. And then 10 years later, someone has the same idea again, except now it's an entirely new set of developers. They don't realize that their brand new idea has actually already been in the game before and already didn't work before. And like the super capitals versus subcaps, how many times has that been nerfed? Like there was in the like 2010s, we had tracking titans and super carriers murdering subcaps, and lo and behold, that proved to be terrible. And so they were all nerfed and it went away. Then a couple of years later, somebody has the bright idea, let's make super carriers kill subcaps again. And let's give Haws to titans. And it's like, well, we've been here before. We know where this leads. And the only difference now is that Goonswarm has more titans. So obviously that gets nerfed after considerably shorter period of time.
I mean, the bottom line for me was, again, I don't think the CSM is usually wrong when it comes to us guessing player sentiment on things they won't like. I think there are times when we're not 100% sure about things they will like, but I think we've got an almost spotless record of saying, guys, they're not going to like this. And I know maybe some folks out there will say, well, that's because we don't like anything, which is fair. But at the end of the day, part of the reason having the 10 players on the CSM is so you can bounce ideas off them. And if they say, guys, I don't think this is going to work, you know,
well,
maybe
CCP has a really hard time telling the difference between something that a few people on Reddit loudly don't like and something that is actually driving people out of the game.
Right.
The Blackout, perfect example. They were writing off all of the complaining on Reddit about how bad Blackout was as, oh, well, this is just whiny crabs. Well, the reality was we're sitting there watching the player counts plummet, and it's like CCP is not even paying attention to their own statistics.
Nope. All right, enough beating up on these guys, because we do have a couple things on here that were good things that happened this year. The first one is the next one, which is number 4. Fanfest returns, and we all got COVID. But listen, Fanfest returned. This was the first time that we had Fanfest since 2018. 2019 was the Fanfest, or was the Around the World tour. 2020 was canceled because of COVID. 21 was also canceled because of COVID. So this was the first time that we got a Fanfest. It was nice. It was good to see everybody getting back to Iceland. Obviously, Fountain Frank was there and got on the stage, which was, I think, the highlight of the Fanfest for all of you people, was seeing Frank there. Mine One got to spin at the party on the top of the world. It was a good time. And they made a lot of announcements. Not the best announcements, right? Go ahead, Nom.
I like that Fountain Frank is wearing the shorts there.
Always. That's what he does. Mark, you were at FanFest.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well,
that's a loaded question, I know.
You really want to know what I think? I think it was really great to see everybody again. I think that was awesome. I think it was really, really cool to get the players together. I know that a conservative estimate would probably be that 250 people got COVID there, but.
And I say we all, obviously not everybody did.
Right.
I didn't, because I had just had it like 2 months before, but everybody else did.
I don't think that's CCP's fault. I don't think there's much that they could have done differently. It just is what it is. I think when you have 1,000 people come into town by way of 100 different airports all over the world, you bring every kind of exotic strain of flu and whatever with you. So it just is what it is. I think if you made the decision to go, you knew full well what you were committing to and what you could expect. Now, that being said, I think the real shortcoming this year was the venue. That place is just terrible. And Reykjavik isn't that big of a town. So to find yourself on the ass end of town, it's almost difficult to do. If you're familiar with downtown, if you've ever been there before, you're used to kind of the foot traffic, being able to walk around to all the different, because downtown Reykjavik is wonderful. It's an amazing place. There's just nothing like it. Being able to walk around to all those bars, that's a big part of what makes it so charming and so fun and so good for tourism. So to put FanFest 5 miles the other direction, where the only way you can get back to town is to take a taxi cab, they don't have Uber there. You've got to talk to a taxi company. They have the shittiest taxi app imaginable. I only know because I watched Brisc wrestle with it for 4 fucking days. It was like, I've been to Reykjavik, I think 7 times, and I've probably been in something like 15 taxi cabs. 14 of them were at this last FanFest. I had never used a cab but once when we
used
were
to walk everywhere.
Yeah,
you could walk everywhere we wanted to go.
Right. So it's almost just like some kind of weird big brain move of theirs. Like, let's take the biggest strength of the city we're doing this in and remove it and then add a bunch of inconvenience. It's like the motherfucking DBS all fucking over again.
Oh no.
You know, I'm glad they're doing it. I think the venue sucks. Yes, Harpa is like a place you would have a dentist convention, but it's a block away from the nearest bar that everybody loves going to. So they got to get out of that venue. It sucks shit. It's claustrophobic. It's in the middle of fucking nowhere. It's just, I don't know. I'm glad they're doing it. Like I said, they've really fallen apart on live events. They've just sort of been like, oh, you know, if we can help conduct Vegas this year by sending a tweet and some thoughts and prayers, we'd be happy to organize Vegas. You know, like they're just relying on players to prop up all this shit. So I'm glad they're at least holding one event up. I just wish they could sort of clean it up. You can't tell me that everybody thinks going to the Langenberger Wittgenstein Sports Arena is a great fucking venue. It's awful. Give me a break. Weren't you there last year?
I had to Google, had to spell it every single time before I put it in the app.
Fucking cab drivers are all like, where are you going?
Where is this?
You're like, fucking soccer field in the middle of nowhere. And they're like, oh, yeah, Langenberger.
Yeah, if they're going to keep using that place, they need to have like just a shuttle set up. You know, something taking people back and forth to downtown.
That would be a really good idea.
There you go.
And I was mad about
I like your dynamic
Fest.
bounty shuttling. That's good. That's good.
I was mad about this Fanfest because like a week or two before I got COVID and I wasn't sure it was COVID. It was super mild. So I didn't even think about it until like the day before I was supposed to go to Iceland. And I went and I took the test and it comes up positive and it's, shit. Like at that point, I was already asymptomatic and I was less worried about spreading it and more worried about like being able to leave the country and come home.
Right.
In retrospect, I should have just gone. The test would have been fine. And even if I was contagious, like, okay, 2 more people would have gotten COVID that year.
Right. Exactly. Everybody else would have got it already. It was fine.
The electric scooter thing, like, as much as I want to participate in a fucking GoFundMe to replace some drunk Eve player's front teeth when they knocked them out driving an electric scooter in the fucking winter down these dangerous ass roads, like that is not a solution whatsoever. That should never be a solution in the dark or with people who are drinking. So I don't even consider that. Those things are just little murder machines.
Especially with the size of groups that are there, because especially
with the size of people that are there. I mean, look at the average Goon player.
Right, you're not talking about like one drunk guy on a scooter. You're talking 20 drunk people at 250 pounds each, all on scooters. Like that's never mind the person on the scooter. That is dangerous to everybody else.
Yeah. Just a bit. All right, moving on. Number 3. This was the big good thing for the year, which was the faction warfare expansion. I think by any metric, the faction warfare expansion has been a success.
I can think of one.
Tell me one.
We can't participate in it.
Well, that doesn't count. Yeah, parts of it we got to participate in.
I'm willing to acknowledge this as soon as we're allowed to participate. Until then,
so hopefully in January or first quarter, whenever they get this allegiance system done, whatever they're going to call it, and let us all participate, then that'll be one thing. But other than that, guys, I think by every other metric that this has been pretty successful. Folks have logged in, people have liked it. Faction warfare is now a thing again. Nullsec is seeing a lot of PvP combat, a lot of small group combat. We've seen drama, faction warfare drama for the first time in ages, which is nice. That's usually a sign of a good community when there's drama
there's usually not
everywhere.
Enough people around to have drama, so it's a good sign.
Right. Like when you finally get enough people to have drama, that's a good sign. That's what I like to see. And it included a lot of different other things that they added that we had asked for. We finally got alliance skins. We finally got corporation skins. We finally got ways to tax LP and other stuff. I mean, we're getting that. And listen, I know was not done the best way. Hopefully we can get them to fix it.
1 step forward, 2 steps back. Like they
But-
had the alliance and corporation logos, and then they gate them behind freaking daily missions that nobody wants to do.
Right.
Like, and meanwhile, they're sitting here trying to monetize everything they fucking can. Let us pay real money for this shit. I am willing to throw real money at CCP for the Alliance logo. I am not willing to grind through daily missions for I don't know how long.
The motto of CCP for the last 3 years could have been EVE Online. You can have anything you want as long as you have a credit card. And then this new feature, accept that, right? Like you got to do shitty
Except
dailies.
This you got to do dailies.
Right. Just big time. Another big brain move where you're like, man, it's puzzling. You guys just must have too much fucking money, you know? Because I will not do one of those goddamn things. There's certain segments of players just don't do shit like that, you know? So dude, fucking swipe the credit card. Nobody's going to complain. It's a cosmetic. It's the one harmless thing you can monetize, and we're not doing it. Cool.
And speaking of, what do you guys think was the second largest, biggest event of the year?
The fucking subscription price has to be, if it's not number one.
Booyakasha. Number 2, CCP increases the subscription price. You want to talk about controversial. This is still an issue. People are still complaining about it, regardless of the amount of sales CCP has done, regardless of the amount of ways that they have created so that people don't have to pay the full amount. It is the biggest thing that happened in the game, except for the next one. It's had huge impacts. It cratered the player counts for months until the expansion came out and so slowly started picking people back up into the game. And I honestly think, and I mean, granted, we're not going to know for sure what the impact is until we see CCP's tax returns this year, but I don't know how much it helped, because their third quarter numbers, according to Pearl Abyss, if it hadn't been for massive inflation of the Korean won, were right in the middle of what they normally get. They weren't on the bottom side. They weren't on the top side. So I don't know what the impact was of this change, if it was even noticeable.
Well, I think
other than people being pissed about it.
I think it's clear that this probably hurt them quite a bit. You can see that in the fact that, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like every time I log in, I've got special offers popping up everywhere. Please subscribe. We'll let you subscribe for the old price if you just do it for a few months. And they seem desperate to get people to continue subscribing even at the old price. And that's how CCP rolls. They make a bad decision. They will never acknowledge that it was a bad decision. They will never roll back the decision. They will just plow forward until they find a way to make the bad decision moot.
I think with this one, the entire world was going through sort of a financial correction, because every government on the planet had just turned on the money printers to try to sort of buy their way through the pandemic. So in CCP fashion, they sort of missed it. It was already, I mean, they were 6 months after your DoorDash subscription, your Netflix subscription, your HBO subscription. After all those went up and it was like out of the news cycle anymore, they were like, here we come, just fucking late as ever, like usual. And I don't know, it's something that only they really have the answer to. I know in our little universes on Discords or in our communities in the game, I was under the impression that I thought they would have cut their business in half. Just based on people I know, what I did with my own accounts, things like that. I would be shocked if such was not the case, but their financial statements have held steady to Brisc's point. They seem to have been treading water just fine. So maybe we need a little bit more time for that lagging data to catch up. Knowing what we know about the company, do we want to infer too much based on their accounting methods and things like that? Like, are they doing like the SPF style of accounting where it's written on a napkin somewhere and we're just hoping for the best? I don't know.
I hope they're not using QuickBooks. Let me just tell you.
They probably are. But the free version, the web version, not the upgrade. But you know what? I think it was a huge clusterfuck. It was a big detraction from the game. They were a day late and $1 short when they came out with it. And I can only imagine it really, really hurt the number of subscribed accounts because that's just what I've heard. You didn't hear, I mean, you'll see a contrarian once in a while be like, I don't mind paying more for the same thing. Well, you're a fucking dummy. I'm sorry. You should. You know, it's just this is not how it should be. So it's too bad that such a thing happened when they were having such a piss poor year already, because you just infuriate the moderates. You're always going to have the shrill fringes in the game. Unifying everybody else in hatred, not a good look, and it leads you to 10,000 people logged into your game in primetime US time zone.
You mentioned Netflix. By the time that CCP was around raising their prices, Netflix had already done their earnings and shown that like they lost, what was it, like 20% of their subscribers from their price hike.
Yeah.
Like any extra money they made from raising their prices, they lost from losing subscribers. And so like CCP had that data available when they did this.
And I think so. To the comments in the chat, I have to agree. Yeah, this was one of those games where they had never increased the prices since 2003. This was the first time they increased the price. I think the problem was they just did it at a time where everybody else had increased their prices, as Nam and Mark had just mentioned, and there was the feeling that there was no additional what am I paying more for? I'm paying more for the privilege of playing the same game that I've already been playing for a while. And that didn't feel good.
What other MMO has raised their price to $20 a month?
I mean, that's the thing. Even the MMOs that have raised their prices, like Albion raised its prices. I mean, RuneScape raised their prices, but a lot of these groups also had grandfathers. It was only for new accounts or new people joining. Folks that had existing subscriptions could keep the old rate or something like that. Now I know, and we've said this before, CCP went out of their way over the next 6 months to run sale after sale after sale. They put together the multiple account discounts so that you're only paying the extra price on one account. The rest you're at the same rate you were paying before. You know, they reduced they did a sale so that the amount of Plex you need in the game to Plex a month of gameplay was less than it was before, which was a cut for a lot of people. It caused a huge spike in the Plex markets. So I think at the end of the day, they've gone out of their way to try to fix it, but it didn't help the way that they rolled it out, when they rolled it out, the lack of any content, all that kind of stuff. It just was very controversial. I think we're still seeing the impacts of it today, and it remains controversial. There are still some people will say, hey, it was fine that they did it. They needed to do it. There are other people that'll say, no, this wasn't all right. You know, I had to unsub these many accounts. Why didn't they cut their prices? If they cut their prices, they could have made more money. All these different things that we, talk about that we'll never really know the answer to. But, at the end of the day, it's hard to put into words something that the company did this year that was as big as the subscription price. I think it blows everything else out of the water. There's only one thing I think in EVE Online was bigger this year. It was the number one thing, and we're getting to it right now, and you guys can probably guess what it is. And that is the Mitani retires from EVE Online. The number one thing that happened in 2022 in July. Now listen, regardless of how you feel about the man, the Mitani, regardless of how you feel about the person, Alex Gianturco, regardless of how you feel about the things that have happened through Goonswarm, things that have happened in the game over the last 15 years, regardless of how you feel about things he may have said, what your take is on the Wizard Hat incident, what your take is on all of the other stuff that we've done, how he was on this show, any of that kind of stuff, no one can argue that there is no single player that has played this game that has had any bigger impact on it than the Mitani. His name is synonymous with EVE. When you think of EVE players, you Google EVE players, his name comes up consistently, and he was playing at the top of the game for more than a decade. He served on the CSM. He was the chairman of the CSM when the CSM had chairman. He was the first person they turned to during the Summer of Rage. There was all kinds of stuff that happened in the game in terms of content that was driven by him, multiple wars. They've write history books about this game. His name is littered through it. Regardless of what he may or may not have done, may or may not have said, did say, didn't say, did do, didn't do, no one can argue that it was a tremendous loss for the game, for the show, for the Imperium, for Goonswarm Federation, when he decided to step down and retire in July. Any comments from you people?
I think Mitani leaving is a tremendous loss for the game. One of the, love him or hate him, like one of the facts about Eve is that waging wars in Eve takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of man hours. It is a shitload of work, and a lot of it's not fun work. It is work. And so you tend to get more fun out of the game when you have personalities that that people get enthusiastic about in either direction, wanting to burn down the Imperium because of the Mitani, or wanting to fight with the Mitani against the rest of Eve. Like either side of it, it's energizing to everybody and good for the game as a whole. It's having lukewarm leaders that don't they play the game. Okay, well, I don't have any strong motivation to go after that alliance, so you're not going to get any kind of a big war out of that.
Mark, what are your feelings?
This almost seems like one of those things that before you even answer the question, you have to offer some kind of a disclaimer, like, yes, I know he fucked up, and yes, I know he was a flawed individual, as many of us are, but I sort of equated some of the early drama. You know how when a teenager becomes famous in Hollywood, they get in a movie. It's very challenging to not have your life just immediately unravel because people are sticking a microphone in your face and you have no business talking to lots of people in situations like that. I think Mitani was literally famous for longer than a lot of us have ever been playing Eve, doing interviews with things like Playboy and all the different gaming articles. And I think he very much fell in love with the persona that he was playing and sort of indulged in it in such a way that he became that entertaining person that was polarizing for their enemies, but very beloved by their space tribe. That being said, he was a personal friend of mine. It's not the same not having him. I'm disappointed about it. I understand why there were people that thought he should have hung up his spurs and wandered off to do something else. And I understand that there were probably just as many people who didn't think that he should do anything. He shouldn't have relented when he did. But, as he put it that morning when we were talking to him, I can't ride this fucking tiger anymore. It's going to throw me, and it's better to dismount, on your own terms, I suppose. I know for me, that was kind of the end of it. I was like, well, then I guess I'm done too. It's like, let's get some of these big, giant, old trees knocked down and out of the way so that the new flowers and saplings can bloom in their place. But, my interest in everything Eve related immediately was gone. He's just my dude, and I know he wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. So
I don't think any of us are.
Yeah.
And that's to the point. Like, you go through the kind of media anal exam that someone like him has gone through. I've gone through those in real life. Others have gone through those. Yeah. Nobody gets away unscathed, even if they didn't do anything wrong. But regardless of what he did do, what he didn't do, the allegations, no, we've never gotten any straight answers from anyone about all of that stuff. But the reality is, in the game and in the meta, he was the best of the best. And as far as I'm concerned, like hosting this show, this is his show. This will always be his show. I am the host now, but this is the Mitani show, and it has been his show. He created it. He nurtured it through multiple years, and not having had him on the show for the last 6 months, I'll tell you, has been very tough. Having him, knowing he was going to be the side seat partner on the show, at least for me, was always it was a relief, because I knew that no matter what, if we had a slow news week, if we didn't have a lot to talk about, if we needed to figure out something that we could do to try to get folks interested in the game or whatever we were doing, or just having a good show, he was a performer. He showed up. I could rely on him to talk for half the time, so I didn't have to. And not having him around has been very hard, and that's one of the reasons why we have not filled the second co-host seat on this show. We've had guest hosts for the last 6 months, and we'll probably have those well into the future, because I don't think there's anybody out there that could fill his shoes or that would want to. So at least for me, I miss him. I talked to him today. I know others have talked to him recently. He's doing all right. He's having fun. He's out living his best life, enjoying, time out away from space tribes, away from the internets. Maybe we'll get to see him in the future. I think hopefully we will start seeing him slowly come back. I think a lot of the drama and the anger and everything that was happening at the time is over, or at least is gone. A lot of the folks that were involved in a lot of that stuff have moved on. And I'm hoping that we'll get the chance to have him come back and at least visit us on the show sometime in the next year, but we'll find out. But anyway, that was the number one thing that happened in EVE Online this year, the Mitani retiring from EVE. Now, we're a little over, but this is the last episode of the season. So let me go over some stuff, and then we're going to get out of here. Next week, again, is Christmas Eve. The week after is New Year's Eve. There will be no meta shows for either of these days like we did last year. So 2 weeks hiatus. We will be back on January the 7th. That is Saturday. That will be the start of season 4 of the meta show. This is the end of season 3. I can't believe I have done this show for 3 straight years, starting our 4th year in January. Hopefully we're going to have a lot of fun to talk about. We're going to have stuff going on over the holidays, and we're going to continue doing our best to provide you with the number one, most watched, most interesting, most brisky EVE talk show on Twitch. And I hope that we will get to see more of our friends, Nom Nom and Merkelchen, in the new year. Although I know they'd like having their Saturdays back, so I have to fight them to get them on the stream. Oh, you guys have anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. I know we're very hard on CCP. That's because we give a shit about this stupid game and the stuff they do to it. Any attention they can pay to it is probably a win-win. So it seems like things are doing better. This year started off really rough, but I think it's probably worth mention that player sentiment is improving. They may not have hit every single thing just yet. They got plenty of work to do, but at least they're moving the needles in the right direction. And that's sort of evidenced by higher player login numbers, which I think should always be a reasonable measure of success. So glad to see it.
Nah.
Yeah, it's nice to see that CCP has gone from breaking things to trying to fix things. But
and I think we're all pleased, at least as Merck said, the numbers are trending upwards. There's stuff to do. They're still making some changes, some boneheaded things we don't like, but at the same time, they're doing a lot of things that we do like. And as always, we are fair, tough but fair on this show. We will give them credit when they deserve it, and we will take them to task when they don't.
Even at their very best, CCP has always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So, you got to take what you can get when you can get it.
There you go. All right. And I would like to say, I would have a personal thank you to all the folks in the chat who are enjoying my camera work and my lighting. Yes. Thank Mrs. Brisc for fixing everything. This is how it works. So after years of doing this show, we finally got it to a point where it makes sense. So we did it. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Meta Show for December the 17th, 2022, and our last meta show of the year of our Lord 2022. We will see you in the new year. Happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas to everybody. And you stay classy, Nui.